This surveillance camera is connected via Ethernet through this long coil to the security guard's computer, which has gone to sleep. So, sorry, let me real quick make sure this is up to date. You can see the security guard camera showing the feed from the camera pretty much live. There's a little bit of a delay, but I can't steal the money from the vault because it's being watched by a security guard and they come arrest me. All right. By the way, the rest of the demo, the rest of the things that we have set up on this board are strictly for us to aid in presenting this. None of the security guard computer isn't actually attached to these other computers in any way, which is why we're displaying the picture from it using another camera. It's a little bit silly, I know, but it helps to show that we really don't need network access. We just need one Ethernet cable. All right, so what's inside an Ethernet cable? Well, if you remove the jacket from an Ethernet cable, pretty much any kind of cable, Cat5, Cat6, you're going to find yourself with 4 twisted pairs. Now, these twisted pairs are what carry the actual data. There's a lot of various Ethernet standards, for instance, 10 base T and 100 base T. These two Ethernet standards are quite simple in the way they work. They only use 2 of the 4 pairs to send data. One of the pairs takes data this way, the other pair takes it that way. And beforehand, they of course negotiate which one's going to talk in which direction. This is neat because you can just sort of tap into the middle of the cable, sort of phone tap alligator clip style, and pull the data off in the middle. This is called a passive tap. Now, the wires are twisted together, first of all to minimize the interference they receive, second of all to minimize the interference that they emit, and third of all to maintain a very carefully controlled impedance of about 90 ohms. Now, at either end of the Ethernet cable is a network interface card or NIC. And these network interface cards have a termination resistor on them, which is also 90 ohms. This prevents reflections and floats the cable in a very nice way that makes it all happy. So if you just sort of blindly take another network interface card and attach it to the middle, you'll be able to sniff the data off of it, but you're unintentionally adding another termination resistor to the middle of the cable, which is going to heavily degrade the signal and perhaps cause data loss. So it is possible to passively tap 10 and 100 base T Ethernet with another network interface card, but you have to remove that termination resistor, which is a little bit of an invasive surgery for your NIC. Not the best option. Now, 10 base T and 100 base T are great, but they're a little bit outdated. They were introduced in 1995. We want to be a little bit more up to date. So, in 1999, gigabit Ethernet was introduced, so we want to be at least current with 1999, I think. Now, gigabit Ethernet is a whole other beast. Gigabit Ethernet uses all 4 pairs to send data. And it's not this simple, 2 this way, 2 that way scheme, no. They use all 4 pairs to send data in both directions at the same time. They should say, hey Eric, how's that possible? Doesn't the data get all mixed up, all jumbled together? And the answer is yes, it does. But here's how it works. Let's say I want to send data onto this line. I'm at one end of the cable. What I do is I write the data I want to send onto the line. And then I immediately read back what I see on the line. And then I subtract out what I know that I sent. And the result is what the other person sent. It's pretty clever, but it means that if you're trying to tap the cable in the middle, you're going to see all that data going both directions. There's going to be no way to really disambiguate it, and it's basically impossible to passively tap gigabit Ethernet. I certainly don't know the way. The only way to read the data off of a gigabit Ethernet line is to become one of the ends. That is, if you're in the middle of the cable, you need to cut that cable, add your own network interface cards or other devices into the center, and you now basically become the ends of those Ethernet cables, and you can accurately tell what data is being sent. The only kind of tap you can do with gigabit Ethernet is an active tap topology. Now, there's a lot of different, I mentioned 10 base T and base T gigabit Ethernet. I really don't want to implement these protocols, mostly because there's a lot of people who have done it very well already, namely the people who make network interface cards. And so, in order to insert myself into the middle of this cable, I really don't need to learn how Ethernet works or implement Ethernet. I just need to implement a way to reroute where the signals are going, to take the cable and change the direction of the data to go to my NICs rather than straight through the cable. Now I'm going to take a break for a second here to show what Zack has been doing here. He took this blue Ethernet cable that was connecting the camera to the computer, and he removed the sheet. And he's now exposed to the 4 twisted pairs on the inside. You can see green, brown, orange, and blue. So the device that we made to redirect Ethernet to redirect the flow of the data is called the tap board. And it looks approximately like this. I can show you it on the camera too. This is the tap board. Now the tap board has a lot of cool features. It has 8 latched relays, which are used to reroute the Ethernet signals where we want them to go. Now these aren't standard relays, these are 1 gigahertz rated relays. These relays will pass things up to 1 gigahertz bandwidth without breaking a sweat. And that's good because 100 base 2 gigabit Ethernet only uses 125 megahertz of bandwidth, so that'll work great. It uses, additionally, 16 punch-down connectors. These punch-down connectors are really neat because they connect to the cable by displacing the insulation around it and connecting to the metal inside. You don't actually need to break the physical connection at any time to attach a cable to these punch-down connectors. On the board, there are several traces which the Ethernet will flow through eventually. And these traces are designed to be 90 ohms impedance, just like the Ethernet cable. This is cool because if you attach our board to the Ethernet cable and then use a cable network analyzer, we weren't able to get our hands on one of these because they're very expensive and nobody we knew had one. But we feel that, we strongly believe that this board would be basically invisible to a cable tester. It would show up as the same length, and it would show up without very much distortion in the signal where the board is spliced in. Lastly, this board is completely powered and controlled over USB. And the nice thing about USB is that you can connect it to a computer, and then you can connect that computer to the internet with SSH, which means you can control the routing of this Ethernet cable from across the internet, well, way far away from where you might actually be interacting with your victim's networks and cables and stuff. So let's take a quick look at what Zack has been doing over here. What he's done is he's working diligently on splicing the cable into the tap board using this punch-down tool. And so what he's doing is he's displacing the insulation on the wires, making electrical connections to the board, but without interrupting the data that's being sent. And as you can see, the camera feed is uninterrupted. You can see the timestamp up there still ticking away. These lights are annoying. There we go. So far, we haven't interrupted the camera feed. Now, by default, or let me start with, there are 4 ports on the tap board. Device under test A, device under test B, tap A, and tap B. In the default sort of passive configuration, device under test A is connected to device under test B. Now, the way that you attach to this tap board is first of all by splicing your own man-in-the-middle mix into tap A and tap B. Then, you can lay the target Ethernet cable across it, splicing it into both DUTA and DUTB. And if you remember, DUTA and DUTB are connected together by default. So what you've done is there are now 2 possible signal paths for the data to go through. You've added a redundant copper path by punching down the Ethernet cable into the tap board. And because there are 2 redundant paths in the tap board, this means that you can then remove one of them. That is, you can cut the twisted pair, leaving the signal routed purely through the tap board. And you can do this without ever interrupting the signal at all. Interesting. We can look over on the camera now. Zack has finished punching it down into both DUTA and DUTB. The camera feed's still going. Yeah, you can wave your hand in front of it. There we go. So far, the camera feed's uninterrupted, but now we're going to start removing the middle of this Ethernet cable, leaving the signal routed only through the tap board. Let's look at the video. You can see the timestamp still ticking away. No disturbance yet. Almost done, just 2 more twisted pairs. Again, video. And there we go. We've completely removed the middle of the So what do we do now that we've spliced in the middle of the Ethernet cable? Well, first let me talk a little bit more about how this tap board works. Just real quick. This tap board has a couple of cool features. One is that it's basically fail-safe. Right now it's in a completely passive configuration. The cable looks basically identical to how it was before. And we're going to want to change that eventually. But if the board suddenly loses power, or if your computer program running it freezes, you want it to revert back to that. Maybe it's better that the camera feed go down than show what is actually going on. Who knows? But in any case, this board has a fail-safe feature where if the board loses power, let's give it a second. So I'm going to pull out the board's power by pulling out this USB. What's going to happen is that the blue light's going to blink, indicating that power was lost. And this giant capacitor here stores enough energy to reset all of the relays back into the capacitor configuration, if that's what you want. Another cool feature of the tap board is that this is my favorite feature personally. The tap board is tamper evident. What this means is that there's an accelerometer on the board. And this accelerometer will detect if the board is jostled or otherwise disturbed while in operation. And so we have a short little program running here where if I tap it, the blue light's going to blink to indicate that it's been tampered with. But of course, you can actually connect this to something that phones home. Because sometimes I imagine you might be using this board in a sort of critical application where it's very important that it hasn't been disturbed. This circuit can give you peace of mind. Now, we're of course in a passive tap configuration right now. The copper paths are as they were with the original cable. But that's not how we want it to be. We want it to eventually be an active tap. We want to connect device under test A to tap A, device under test B to tap B. This is the sort of critical step. This is where we first start to take control of the Ethernet cable. And so this is going to cause a little bit of packet loss as the NICs renegotiate the various protocols they're using. But we found that it doesn't cause TCP connections to drop, for instance. And it causes very minimal interruption to UDP traffic and other lower level traffic. And so let's show that right now. We are about to run this command, which is going to flip the relays and switch our box into an active tap configuration. So let's do that. Let's show this board. You can see the blue light is on, indicating that we are now actively tapping the traffic. Okay. And the guard computer went to sleep, unfortunately again. But if we make sure that's up to date, we can see that the camera feed is still ticking away. Sorry, you can't see the timestamp there. But, okay.
Here we go.
So Brian's giving a thumbs up on that camera, showing that it's still completely uninterrupted. Yet it's now routed, the signal's now routed through our NICs, and we now have complete control over the network. With that, I'm going to hand the mic over to Zack here, and he's going to talk a little bit about the software side of things.
Great. Yeah, I guess it's sort of figured that my hand's on here. But so now that we have basically complete control, great. Now we have complete control over the traffic going between the camera and our security guard's computer. We're really close to being able to loop the video that's being sent to the camera. Before we get into that, we need to think a little bit about how the video transmits. So the sort of like obvious thing to do would be kind of to record all the traffic that's going through this cable for like a minute or something, and then just play that same set of packets over and over and over again. The problem is, this doesn't actually work. It turns out there's sequence numbers and things that are involved in the data stream that prevent this attack from just working as easily as you might have hoped to. There also might be some spurious traffic going on, or maybe the security guard's computer tries to access a website. Either way, we need to actually examine how our video data is being sent across the network. So the video is encoded with the H.264 code, but H.264 isn't just dumped over the network. It's actually wrapped up in...
Can't hear you.
Okay, is this better? Or?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so the videos are just, the H.264 packets aren't just dumped right over the network. They're wrapped up in a protocol called RTP, which itself is wrapped up in UDP, which is wrapped up in IPv4 from the 90s, and which is then wrapped up in Ethernet. So in order to actually understand what is video data, we need to be able to decompose all these packets, or all these protocols. And so in order to do this, we built our own man-in-the-middle network stack called LENS. And LENS stands for Live Editing of Network Streams. So as I said, it's a two-phased network stack that we wrote in Python, actually. And basically it's able to decode all these protocols that we need to do video looping and a few others. And basically, it's designed to be as transparent as possible. Basically, we don't want to just remake a TCP stream using the standard Linux TCP want our attack to be as indistinguishable as possible. Also, it's worth noting, because we've done this Ethernet wire trick, we don't need to do any type of ARP spoofing or add any additional traffic to the network that might be detectable and would let people know that someone's trying to perform a man-in-the-middle attack. Finally, we also have the ability to implement in our system these extra layers that are sort of like very high-level applications that we can use to just filter data, or say run things through FFmpeg or make loops out of video streams. Because this is really useful for us to just make cool applications using this stack. So let's take a look at how we might use lens in a different example from video. Let's look at how we might implement one of my favorite Chrome extensions, the Cloud to Bud extension. So the way this works is you're reading tech news and it's terribly boring. And so it'd be much better if we replaced every instance of the word cloud with my butt. Maybe it'd be worth reading. So normally this is done, in your browser, and it's all nice. But it'd be cool if we could implement this at the network level. So everyone on your network sees or gets to experience the joy of cloud to bud. So let's take a look at our software. So first, we're going to need to decode Ethernet. So we're going to add a layer to decode Ethernet. And from there, we're also going to need to decode IPv4 and TCP and HTTP. So that way we can extract out just the body of an HTTP request. From there, we're going to just take the body of an HTTP request and run it through a layer, which will replace every instance of cloud with bud. Pretty simple. Okay, very good. So now, if we have this stack set up, I'm almost there. When we have this stack up, if the security guard's laptop tries to open up a page on cloud computing, instead of what they saw before, we'll see something a little different.
The internet here has been a little bit flaky all day. I definitely blame you for that.
Not our fault at all, probably.
There we go.
What is question?
Really great. Okay, so we can do this to modify, this just shows that we can modify TCP streams on the fly that are going through our lens box. So now we can use this to make camera loops, right? So to loop video, it's a little bit more complicated than just dealing with an HTTP request. Instead, we have to deal with this protocol called RTP. RTP stands for real-time protocol, and it's a bit more complicated because it also involves a few other things. There's also this channel known as RTSP, which just handles sort of like session data, like playing and pausing the video. This is over TCP. But then you also have RTCP, which is unrelated to TCP, and just sort of tells you some codec information, quality of service statistics, things that we don't actually care about for looping video. And finally, we have RTP, and this is the actual meat that we care about. Sorry about that. So with RTP, the data that's going through RTP is the H.264 data that we want to loop. So here you can see this is like a graph of all the layers that we have to decode everything in a video section, in an RTP section. So we have this UDP layer, and this video port filter to just filter out the traffic on the specific RTP port that we care about. And we have an H.264 layer to unpack these UDP packets into an H.264 stream that we can pass off to, say, FFmpeg. And so FFmpeg is really great. We're going to use it a lot here because it lets us perform a bunch of transformations, some of which are more subtle than others. And basically, with FFmpeg, we can do looping, like cool color effects, or maybe something really subtle. Yeah, this is probably not what we actually want when it comes down to the live stream. This is live. if we can do that, we're really close to being able to loop video. So all we need to do is just record some of this H.264 data from the camera, maybe for like a few seconds or a minute, and then we're going to pipe this into FFmpeg and use FFmpeg to actually perform a looping command. Then we'll take the stream coming out of FFmpeg and forge packets to look like they're from the camera, but they were just entirely crafted via FFmpeg. And once we have that, the security guard's computer is just going to show our loop, and we can do whatever we want afterwards if we're in the safe. Whatever that may be. Probably very legal. Okay. So we're going to just demonstrate that here. So we're using that same setup that I just showed. And first, start recording some video. Record some packets. Okay. So we've recorded our loop. Now, we're going to actually loop this video. And we're using a slightly different setup here that just goes into FFmpeg, and we're using the FFmpeg to loop. So now, if we look at our security guard's camera, it's actually looping. It should be looping.
You can see.
Yeah. So if you put your hand in here, it's not showing up. And if you pay careful attention to the timestamp, it should back on the timestamp. You look at the timestamp will actually go in circles. Yep. So yeah, that's really great. We're like, we can do things in front of the camera, and a lazy security guard probably won't notice that anything weird is going on. But we can do one better. So that pesky timestamp, it'd be nice if we could like generate that or something, but it turns out there's a pretty easy way. We have data, the camera is still streaming data to our box. We're just kind of throwing it out. But if instead we use FFmpeg to merge it with our loop stream, we can just take that little rectangle that contains the timestamp and like nothing else important in there, and just paste that over our video. And so when we put that loop together, the timestamp will still keep going up, but the rest of the video will just be completely static. And so Eric set this up now.
Sorry, it's a little off screen.
Okay. So yeah, you can see the timestamp is ticking up.
Yeah.
Okay, the timestamp is ticking up, and we're gonna. Okay, great. Now that, and yeah, if you notice, Eric is at work. Right next to the ball, and nothing is showing up.
Yeah!
So where do we go from here? So, now that we've run away with our big bag cache, what else can we do with this box? So one thing that we totally glossed over was that there was absolutely no encryption going on here. And so theoretically, if there was SSL or HTTPS going on, it would be a lot harder for us to perform this man-in-the-middle attack. However, I'm not particularly concerned about well-implemented SSL on an embedded system like this camera, which is incredibly hard to give firmware updates to, and yeah, it's a really hard problem. So we're glossing over that. Besides that, we'd also like to mention that this tap word that we've created could be used for a few other things besides Ethernet. It also might be useful for tapping USB, which uses a single pair of twisted pair sending data, or HDMI, which sends most of its data over a set of 4 twisted pairs. We just haven't come up with any good use of band middling and HDMI, but maybe you have something in mind. We also have we have a handful of other demos that are like unrelated to camera looping, but we figured that they were kind of fun applications, and so why not make them? Let's see if this. So we've loaded up this webcomic, which may look a little familiar to some people. And so, a fun thing that this webcomic recommends is, you have some people using your internet. Why not just flip all their images over HTTP so that their experience is just really annoying? And trust me, like having used the upside down internet, it's just really, like you don't know what's going on. It's really hard to use. So we basically have some software just to take every image that's coming in over HTTP and flip it before sending it to the browser.
Someone's taking another second.
We're having demo problems. This demo relies on the internet, which is a hard thing to rely on.
Does anybody know any jokes?
Okay, we're going to try that one again because we had some internet issues.
There we go.
Okay, yeah, so here you can see the images are all flipped upside down. And so, one of the things that this comic talks about, for those of you who haven't seen it, is it has this quote.
There, wait. Oh, it's Miro.
But it's like, what? Someone's live edited the TCP stream? What? No one's that fast. So who wants to guess what we're going to try to do right now? So we have another layer. We have another program set up that basically lets us edit, say, TCP streams live. So you just open up the real editor, and you can add extra things to the HTML.
And script tag, there you go.
Yep. So you can just open up bin, and then once you write out the file, I'm pretty sure this doesn't have any practical purpose other than just making yourself look cooler, but that's irrelevant. Okay. So yeah, basically, we have some more demos to go, but just to remind everyone, we have all the source for our project up on GitHub right now. We have both the hardware for the tap board and the schematics, the firmware for the tap board, all the mechanical components, and most importantly, Blend's software stack code. That's all available on GitHub, and you should definitely use GitHub if you want to reach out and contact us. Yeah, so we have some extra demos using video again. So the thing about so yeah, you've robbed the safe, you've taken all the goods out, you've gotten a clean getaway, you're totally safe, and you want to just turn back and rub it in the security guard space. So how might you go about doing that? Well, thankfully, when we were robbing the safe, we recorded it so that we could play it back later. So now they go try to chase you down and stop the robbery while you're 100 miles away, and they were wondering what's going on. Yeah, so that's the basis of all we want to talk about. So